getting assessed is really important, and kind of leading into what I'm doing now. So our clinic it's actually a part of a larger alliance under the Avalon Action Alliance, and so we're one of 7 TBI clinics around the nation.
Seven
We
TBI
assess
clinics around the nation?
Yeah,
My
so
goodness.
we have, and I work at one of them. I'm at the best one. I'm in here in Florida. Although don't tell my partners that. I may be a little biased. But we'll bring veterans in, and each site is a little different depending on the need, but and they have their different requirements. But we see pre 9/11, we also see post 9/11. But it starts off with a 3-day assessment. You're meeting with our core clinical providers. So like physical therapy, neuropsychology, and speech therapy. I mean, like all these different therapists. And then at the end of it, they come together and they say, hey, does Ashton here have a TBI? And they'll sit there and all come together and make that conclusion.
It's a whole tribe, man. You got to continue. Man, Ashton
gosh,
Kroner,
yeah,
we've
it's so
been
true.
wanting to make this happen, and we finally were able to settle on a date and make it happen. Welcome to Security Halt podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm always looking for individuals that are not just connected and have resources, but are service members in the fight to help people with TBI and concussions. And you fit all those categories. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get started, you have this new, we have a new fundraiser. We have something on the docket. So let's cover that first. Let's talk about what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually, we're really excited to be able to sit there and team up with Charlie Madison Originals, who is actually a Navy spouse. And she started her small owned business. And so I met her at the Military Influencer Conference last year out in Vegas, and we just connected and everything. And so this is the second time that we're doing a fundraiser, but 15% of the proceeds of the sales are actually coming to, the Haley Brain Wellness Program. So we're really excited about that. There's a meaning behind every bracelet. It comes in beautiful packaging, and just Wendy and her family are just absolutely wonderful people to be able to team up with. So we're really excited. It's going until November 20th.
Okay.
And just put in the code Haley after you look on the Charlie Madison website, and you'll be able to sit there and see all the beautiful bracelets that they make.
Absolutely. You guys heard. If you're listening, please do me a favor. Go and just pause this. Just pause it. Put it in the back burner. Bring up a new tab. Go there. Check it out. And throw some money your way. I mean, if you don't want it for yourself, give it as a gift. Get a couple. Give it to your wife, your sister, your friends. What matters most is that we support veteran initiatives, veteran causes. It's going for a good mission. So please take some time out of your busy day today and make that happen. I know I appreciate it. Ashton will appreciate it as well. And who knows, maybe we can make some big waves and help some people that are in desperate need. So thank you for bringing this up to my radar, Ashton. This is awesome. I hope we can help elevate this cause and get some people out there to promote it and get some help.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Dude, tell us about you. Tell us about your journey, because you're not just some, quaint little individual. Like, you're a service member. You're a Marine. You've done some things. How did you find yourself in this space?
Oh my gosh, that's such a fun question. So first of all, I knew as just a young kid that I was going to join the military. I wasn't sure if it was going to be the Army or the Marine Corps, although the very first commercial that I ever saw was of it was actually the Dragon commercials, like back in like the 90s. And I just remember, I think I was like 7, 8 years old. And it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I had just gotten this new TV. So of course I was staying up too late, despite, my parents sitting there telling me otherwise. And so I had saw this commercial, and, right after that commercial was the Army commercial. And they were like, like there's a bunch of soldiers going through like an obstacle course. And it was back to back. And I was like, grown-ups get to play on jungle gyms for a living? Like, this is cool. And so of course I go running into my parents' room, and I'm like, Mom, I'm going to join the military. And of course it's like 11 o'clock at night. She's like, what's going on? So she comes into my room, and Jerry Springer actually was on. So again, I would have been, channel surfing. That is not what you want your mom to be able to see. So she thought that I was watching Jerry Springer, and and ever since then, like I just remember those 2 commercials, and I'm like, I want to join the military. And so, some things kind of got set in stone. I grew up in Texas, small town, really small town. And so in order to be able to get out of small towns, a lot of people either they stay there, they join the military, it's kind of like their way out. And so, um, luckily, whenever, I kind of was able to afford an opportunity to be able to get out of get out of the small town through through my mom and everything. And so, but in the back of my head, I was like, I'm going to join the military. So she kept on pushing college. In fact, I think I was 11 or 12 years old before she actually grounded me from talking about the military, just in general. And I was like, all right, that's fine. But I knew that I was going to join. And so I enlisted into the Marine Corps in 2007. My mom's like my biggest supporter now, by the way, which is so funny, is because she was not the happiest about it. But when I went to go talk to my recruiter, I was like, I want to do something really cool. I want to be infantry, and he was like, well, no, there's infantry isn't allowed for females. And I was like, okay, well, I was like,
Damn
well,
you! I
that's
want to
not
fight the dragons.
right. And that's exactly what I was saying. I was like, all right, well, I want to play around with the jungle gym. And we just had a great conversation. So, I ended up, shipping off, deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, and, got to do some really cool things while I was in. I joined Team Lioness out in Iraq, which was just the
Yeah,
coolest experience.
yeah. We got to pause on that because like that time period, 2007 time period, like you had the surge going on in Iraq, and it was almost like that. The big picture was guys were wanting to go to Iraq. Afghanistan was like an afterthought. People didn't give two shits at that point.
Mhm.
And finding yourself in Afghanistan, that time period where there's not a big focus on it. And then the Lioness program, like for a lot of people that don't understand like what that is, like that's a big part of our Marine Corps history now. Because that program grew, it shifted, it evolved, it gave us the CST program. Like what? Break this down for us. What was that like?
God, honestly, I did not know what I was getting into, to say the least. So I was actually, I was bored on deployment, is what it was, and I was, I just turned, like 19 or 20 or whatever, and I'd been on base for ages. It felt like, I mean, it felt like Groundhog's Day, and so, our CO and Sergeant Major, he was, they were looking for volunteers for Lioness, and they're like, yeah, you get to leave base, and I'm like, leave base, heck, yeah, sign me up, so. So of course I signed up, and I was actually out in Iraq when I did the Team Lioness. So they sent a group of female Marines out to Shadow Range, and it was a small little fob a couple of clicks away from where I was at in Al Assad. And we trained for about a week. We learned basic Arabic, and I only remember like a couple of words. Learned how to work with an interpreter, sweep for IEDs and all that kind of stuff. And they're like, "All right, we're going to pair you up with a unit." And I'm like, "A unit? A new unit? Oh, cool! This is going to be interesting." So I got paired with First Battalion, 8th Marines, along with my partner, Andrea Molinar. She's an amazing woman. But her and I were partnered together to be able to, help out First Battalion, 8th Marines. And we were out in TQ, and our job was to win the hearts and minds of the locals.
This is gonna blow your mind.
Mhm.
We served in the same area in the same time.
Oh,
Like,
no way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you were operating at a TQ, we were constantly moving out of there because I was in the 82nd at
Hmm.
that time period. Holy shit.
It's a small world. This is a small world. Well, I just remember sitting there thinking, because, like, first of all, I had never been attached to an infantry unit, and I didn't realize
Yeah.
like the shenanigans that they get up to. And so we go, me and Andrew, we or Molinar, or Corporal Molinar at the time, we go and check in and everything, and we're basically being told, all right, next day we're going to be doing a night mission. And I was like, oh, this is so exciting. It's like I get to leave the base,
Yay.
and again, look at me go, again, had no idea what I was getting into. But it was a really cool experience because, we went out the first night. And mind you, I didn't know any of these people like that I was serving with, but I was having to trust them. They were having to trust us, making sure that we were going to be complete buffoons out in, the middle of the desert. And so,
Yeah.
it was definitely a lot of building of the trust, but I got to really experience some absolutely amazing things. We were out and doing all sorts of various missions, ground patrols. We were going into the locals' houses, just gathering intel. And what I realized during that time frame is that, first of all, we would get kind of shuttled into the kitchen, to sit there and talk to the locals.
Yep.
And while we were there, they would, we would give them bottled waters or the candy, like the kids would come up and they'd be like, "Hello, hello," which is candy. And so we'd sit there and just, kind of throw some, I always kept Werther's in my drop pouch. And so, they started, telling us things, like just little things. And I mean, it was just so cool because the guys, they would be, talking to the men and, like the older, older boys, and they weren't getting anything, but the
Nope.
women, they like to sit there. And I mean, just like every other, a lot of other women around the world, we like to gossip. We sit there and, tell all sorts of stories. And so we were able to get some really good, good intel. Unfortunately, Team Lionesses, we're only partnered with just a short time. It's like a month, 2 months max, and then we're taken back to our parent command. Which that was one of the things that I given on the after action is like, hey, we need to be able to train together prior to deployment and stay with them the whole time. Because I mean that just builds that trust and that that camaraderie and everything. So I do wish that the military had done that from the get go, but still, I look back on that like two months, and I was like, this is probably like the most influential thing I've ever done in my life. I just thought it was so cool. Getting to experience that, it just completely blew my mind.
Yeah, no, you like I said, it's historic. People don't understand that the importance of understanding culture and the importance of understanding like you have to be able to utilize everything at your disposal. And looking back to where the Afghan war later went on, like people don't understand the pivotal role that women ended up playing in the Taliban's own wargaming efforts. Like they ended up having women that were key controllers of information and facilitators. Like that's a reality. They became key players. Like, and we didn't have any understanding of it because you wanted to completely write off women on the objective. They don't have anything useful. And then fast forward to 2019, 2018, like 2020, and you're realizing that your targeting deck now looks a whole lot different because now it's holy shit, all these women. Like, yeah, that's a
Yep.
reality. Like, and you need access and placement. And for us later on, like your programs gave us the data points to create CSTs. And that's something that like, dude, they were, and people just continue to not understand. And it's a hard thing to realize that a lot of them don't want even to share their story because they feel like, we didn't matter. And I'm here to tell you, CST program is really important and it really does
Yeah.
matter. And I can't wait to bring more individuals to have those stories because shit, like you were doing some groundbreaking shit, being able to just offer a little bit of candy, a few rippets, and then the information just
Right.
opens up.
I mean, absolutely. I honestly, like I said, I had no idea what I was getting into, and but at the time, because they didn't really get, they were like, yeah, just go talk to go talk to the locals, and I'm like, okay, well, about what? Like, like, what do you want? They're like, just try to
Yeah.
gather intel, and I'm like, okay, like gather intel. Okay, how's your day going? Like my first conversation, we had a Turkish interpreter. And the one, like I said, the one thing that I remember learning in Shadow Range was Salam Alaikum, which is basically hello. And
Yeah.
so the Turkish, our interpreter, she went in there, said the same thing, and I'm like, Salam Alaikum, like, yeah. No, so we just like said that, and I was like, oh man, it's like I need to let them speak, and I'll just sit there and basically pretend I know what I'm doing. But the first couple of missions were like just trying to figure out what we needed to do. But afterwards, man, it was such an experience. I look back on that time, like I said, it's I sit there and I say I got to see some really cool, cool things that most people my age, and I go back home, talk to my friends that were in college, and we had like completely different experiences, and they're sitting there looking at me like with a horrified look on their face, and like, you said that you weren't going to leave base, and I was like, well, I lied, like it. I got things like that. So, but yeah, it was just, like I said, I look back and, in my time there, and I'm like, man, we are so grateful to be Americans and actually live free, because I got to see it over there, and it was just, a heartbreaking situation.
It is. And it continues to. The people don't understand. They don't study the region, and to think of what Afghanistan used to be like before the Taliban. Like, and if you've never looked, if you've never Googled it, take a moment right now. Just pause, go to Google, and look at Afghanistan before the Taliban took over. Complete night and day difference, and that's how it is for so many countries before they had these extremists take over. Like freedom of religion, development, countries were investing. There was a lot of hope for Afghanistan to become like this big, wonderful place where it's just going to evolve into something great in the region. And then Taliban comes in. And
Yeah,
if you look at it now, you look at and any veteran
it's
that's been there, man,
it's
it,
heartbreaking.
it truly is. Like,
Yeah.
especially now after withdrawal, just sitting back and I'm sure you had some of those same moments of like, holy shit, like what was that experience like for you?
I will say just growing up here in America, growing up on small town and then moving to a big city and, really just getting to experience, life. Like nobody ever told me, no, you can't read or no, you can't go. I mean, I would have loved to have had somebody sit there and tell me, nah, you can't go to school, but, as a kid, but like I remember, on one of our missions, I just brought like a kid's book with me because, our chaplain had so many of them. And, I ended up bringing, some books in and it was the mothers that were wanting to read it. I mean,
Yeah.
it was in English and everything. They just wanted to be able to get some sort of knowledge. And I think at that point it really hit me. And I'm like, wow, this is just so fundamentally different. Like their lives are so, and it's like I get to go back home after just a couple of months, of this and enjoy our freedoms and being an American and being a woman in America, where I have the option of going to school and not being told, who to marry or if I ever had children because I didn't have a child at the time, them being
Yeah.
forced to get married, like that's just, I mean, like I said, I was incredibly grateful because again, whenever I got into it, I was sitting there thinking, this is just going to be hunky dory. I'm going to have the best time of my life. It's going to be a little field trip. But it made me grow up, it made me grow up really, really quick, and realize, just how, amazingly thankful that I am, to have been born, in a free country. Cause, after getting to witness, a woman and child, having to go and get, water from a dirty river where somebody had been, bathing, just a few yards up and then, washing a truck a little bit further down. I mean, you can't sit there and replace the price of freedom, and then be able
Yeah.
to sit there and go and witness that. It was just, like I said, I grew up a lot and I became a lot more thankful for what I have.
Yeah. It's it's always shocking, like the kids, seeing the little kids in every country you go to. That's like the most impactful thing. Every time you see the disparity, the individuals that are doing without so much basic essentials, running water, food. But the one that always sticks with a lot of guys that I talk to are the little girls, the young girls, like that you see doing backbreaking labor, and they're come to find out they're
Mhm.
somebody's wife. Like that's the most shocking and like painful thing. And they always say, "Well, you got to respect culture." It's like, dude, fuck that,
Mhm.
man. It hits you in a different way that you just don't understand. That it's like, fuck, like this is no longer just a football game. This is no longer like, hey, we're here to play. It's like, fuck, like lives are on the line. Like these kids, like how do we change? How do we combat that? And that's a whole problem that we wish we could solve, but none of us are
Yeah.
equipped. We can't change and force, our ideologies and our culture on our Afghan counterparts. But it still is such a painful thing to see, man. And that was like probably one of the hardest things, like when you return back home and you're met with modern electricity, you got everything in the world. You're still thinking of some of the people you come across, man. Yeah, very
It's
difficult.
yeah, I mean, it was definitely right. Like I said, I think, like I said, that was my first deployment. My second deployment was Afghanistan, but my first deployment, I got to do that, Team Lioness. And so, I mean, like the rest of like my, Marines in my unit, yeah, I mean, they, like I said, we were on deployment. There's always something going on there. But
Yeah,
coming back and then, I ended up getting married, like in between my Iraq and Afghanistan deployment, got a bonus kid, from my husband's first marriage. And I kept on looking back like, oh man, it's like I am, and a little, yeah, this is my daughter, she's
yeah,
20 now, but I mean, I remember the whole time sitting there thinking, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like, if she was in, it's like, if our family was in, Iraq and everything, like she would probably already be married off right now. Like it was
yeah,
just, mind blowing to sit there and see that. Cause, I just can't, I mean, I can't even imagine, what these,
yeah,
individuals have gone through and those kids. Like I said, I loved the kids. The kids loved me and my Corporal Molinar. Like we would sit there and just do everything we could just to make. I mean, they used to bomb rush us. As soon as we got off our out of the MRAPs, they would immediately
yeah,
start coming up and big old smiles on their face and everything. And I was always curious to, see kind of what happened to those kids. I mean, it's just one of those things that you kind of think about later on in life because you get to know them.
Yeah. And I can imagine that when it comes time to walk away from service, like, even though you haven't done that job, or maybe that's on the back, on the rear view mirror, like, that's going to be a hard thing to walk away from, knowing that you were part of this organization that brought hope and stability to so many people in combat. And how do you walk away? How do you transition from that? What was your journey going into civilian space?
Oh my gosh, I thought I knew everything. First of all, I ended on recruiting duty, so I came back from Afghanistan and
No.
they had me on recruiting orders, and I'm like, oh man, they got me good. But honestly, I was sitting there telling everybody, it's like, oh yeah, you can easily get a job with the DoD or the government, some
Yeah.
sort of contracting company. Because I saw it whenever I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, like the people that were getting ready to EAS, they were getting all cozy with the contractors trying to get jobs from them and everything, and they were easily making six figures a year. So I'm like, yeah, you'll have no problem, Ashton. You
Yeah.
just go out and do your bad self. So my husband and I, we'd actually purchased a home in North Carolina, in between our deployments. And so we decided to move back to Jacksonville, North Carolina. And no plan
Yeah.
whatsoever. I was like, I'm just going to go. I'm going to start applying for jobs in the DoD. I'm going to work in Camp Lejeune. I'm going to be awesome. And then I found out that they actually want degrees and stuff, not just military experience. So I mean, we struggle. So I mean, I will say, for my husband and I, like I had messed up his resume royally, with all the times that we had moved around. He was a military spouse, and so he was having a hard time getting a job. And then
Yeah.
we had just had a son, so one of us had to, stay. So I tried being a stay-at-home mom for like about 2 months. And I went to my husband. I was like, 2 weeks notice, like I need to start working again. Like this is hard, like so I got back I got back into the work, and my first job actually was a used car salesman. So
No way.
I thought as a recruiter, military trained me on how to do sales. I can sell anything except for used cars, apparently. I think I made one sell my entire 2 months or 3 months that I was working there. It was just awful.
Oh my gosh. Sir,
Yeah.
I've sold the Marine Corps to 18 and 19-year-old kids. I can sell you a car.
Absolutely. If you knew things about cars. Now, the one thing that I did learn working at this wonderful used car sales lot in Jacksonville was that a lot of the cars that are on the lot, they're on there for a while. And so the first like week, instead of having me talk to the customers, they had me go and starting all the vehicles, make sure the battery was still going. And like about 10% of them would not start. So
Oh
they'd
man.
have me out there with the battery pack. I'd sit there and jump start the car and everything. And that was my job for like the first week.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, it's like I'm gonna be selling janky cards to people. Like we're not gonna get a battery replacement or anything. We're just gonna go with it. And I was like, I think this is kind of wrong, but I'm not gonna say anything because I don't want to. It's my first job, so yeah, so I was absolutely terrible at that. And then I ended up switching over to property management with the realtor that I actually sold, bought and sold my house with. She actually helped me get a job in property management in a military town. Can I say how nasty military is in
Yes.
general of rentals
Yes.
houses? Oh my gosh.
We have to lay the ugly truth out there. Not the
Oh
best renters, not the
no.
best people.
I mean, there are some that were phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. However, after, because I mean, I would sit there and go in and, take the photos of people's homes after people would move out, making sure any damages and all that kind of stuff. The amount of times I came home completely covered in fleas because they
Oh,
forgot to sit there and do, the pest control. And I remember coming home one day and I was like, I mean, I was covered, completely covered. I mean, I was
oh
sitting
my
there spraying
gosh.
myself with like, DEET and bleach and everything else, just trying to get it off. And I'm like, oh, Casey, I was like, we can't do this. I was like, we need to do something. And so I started mass applying for jobs. So did he, across the United States, and ended up in Illinois. Where I actually spent the last few years and everything. Started working, at a corporate recruiting, job for a medical device company, and I was amazing at it. I go back to my recruiting days, and I'm like, hey, I was like, I'm actually doing good. But at this next, I mean, I'd already been out for a little over, I want to say like a little over a year at this time. I'd started going to school. I was doing, I mean, all things considering, I am doing amazing, except for the fact that, I have like these thoughts in the back of my head, and I'm like, I'm fine. I'm just going to keep working, work was my outlet and everything until, it kind of started impacting my family. My family is like, I think you need to go see somebody. And I'm like, Psh, I'm fine. Somebody else could use it better than me. Like, I don't want to sit there and waste resources.
Yep.
Typical
Typical
military,
veteran.
typical, yeah. So, I started getting help because my daughter started actually having some, behavioral health,
Yeah.
issues. And, it started, like I said, it was really starting to impact the family. And so I was like, I need to get, I need to get some, some sort of help. So I started going through the VA, and my husband encouraged me to, go through and try to get a VA claim. And I'm like, I don't need one. It's like, that money is, for the really sick people. And then I found out like, I'm actually messed up. So,
Yeah.
I was diagnosed.
Everybody listening, please, 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 please understand. Like, this is a very common thing. We always think of everybody else but ourselves. Somebody else needs this. I'm not suffering bad enough. Somebody else. Your VA claim, your VA benefits are yours. That's for you. You served, you deserve it. It's just like that JG Wentworth commercial. It's my money. I need it now. Called JG. Jeez, it works. It stays in your head.
It does.
Anywho, you have to be willing to just let go, accept that there might be something wrong, get help, and make sure you file a claim. It helps you think of yourself, think of your family, think of your kids, be willing to get help. Sorry, just had to throw that out
No, I
there.
completely agree. I had my husband who was VA rated, I think at like 80 or 90% at the time, and he was sitting there pushing me and everything, and I'm like, nah, I'm good. Like
Yeah,
I just kept on sitting there saying that, and honestly, if it wasn't for him, it wasn't for my daughter, I probably would still be some sort of messed up person, back, how it was back then. So, really listen to your family. Goodness gracious,
yeah,
like they're the ones that'll sit there and tell you the ugly truth, even if you're, refusing to sit there and see it. And I'd have my hand in the sand. I was like, I'm good, I'm fine. And until I wasn't, and so, at that point, I was doing amazing in my career and everything, but I just, and I was also getting headhunted to come work at a nonprofit, at Rush University Medical Center called the Road Home Program. Great organization. They provide PTSD treatment for veterans and first responders at no cost.
that's
They cover airfare,
awesome.
lodging, food. The first time I heard that, though, my previous manager, he was sitting there trying to sell me on this and get me to apply to be outreach and work, basically work in the community to shit, because he liked my message. He liked what I said, and liked my story about getting help. And he was like, yeah, you could help, work with the program. And I was like, this sounds like a Ponzi scheme. Like, who wants to give out free, like free minutes? We have the VA. It's a VA, but I have the VA.
It
So
works
it
sometimes, maybe. No, all right.
exactly, yeah. So it took him like a year to convince me to actually work there, but man, when I did, it was a complete switch for me, and things really started improving. I was working with a lot of mental health providers, and they'd sit there and like tell me whenever they're like, "Well, Ashton, have you thought about doing mindfulness?" And I'm like, "No, mindfulness." They tell me more, and they're like, sitting there telling me how to breathe, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've figured this out already. Like, I know how to. I've been doing it really well for the past 30 something years, but it was such a fun, unique experience, and everything. And, and I will say, life is always a transition. You have different areas of your life where, you're always transitioning to something else, whether it's a new job or, maybe something happened in your, in your family. Like, there's always something going on where you're transitioning from. So I thought I had transitioned incredibly well, post military and everything. But, Murphy's Law, what will go wrong,
Yeah.
will go wrong, whatever. And so, when we were working at the Road Home Pro, or when I was working at the Road Home Program, my husband, who also deployed to Iraq as well, he actually, was starting to, say, hey, I got some back pain. And, he had slipped on his bicycle and, kind of, not to get too personal, but he ended up slipping and hurting his testy, and it, kind of grew a little bit larger. And so I was like, well, just go to the doctor. Kept on going to the VA and everything. And come to find out, he actually was, battling testicular cancer. And it was just one of those like, oh man, so it's like when I thought I was doing really, really well,
Mm.
like, that's when everything's like, kind of comes crushing down on you and everything. So I had to, really lean on my community, lean on my family, I had to be there for my husband, my kids, we had two German shepherds, so it's like there were so many people depending on, me. And I'm like, man, so it was definitely one of those struggles, but we were able to get through it. He's in remission now. It'll be 3 years in February, but we were like, we're ready for that new transition. Let's move to Florida, So moved to Florida, and honestly, we had no plan except that we're moving to Florida. I didn't know where in
Yeah.
Florida, but that was it. And luckily, I'm actually at the the place that we're actually buying our home. We're about to go look at houses, and my now boss calls me, and it's for a TBI program, very similar to the Road Home program, but it's focused on traumatic brain injuries. And they were offering me the development role, so I could fundraise for them and also do community outreach, help bring in more patients. So, I was like, yes, absolutely. I called up my loan officer. I was like, hey, I finally got a job. It's like my house, and so like in the matter of like a 24-hour period, we had multiple sales or multiple offers on our house up in Illinois, purchased a home in Green Cove Springs, Florida, and I had a new job, and I was like, everything kind of felt in line. And it's been a journey. But what I will say, whenever it comes to behavioral health, because I have PTSD, I have TBI. It is a constant. It's like working out. You got to go to the gym. You got to work out. Keep fit and everything. And mental health is absolutely the same. Like if you're not practicing those skills that your therapist tells you, you can easily go down into a downward spiral. And
Yep.
and that's what I advocate so much for. Like, it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay for you just to ignore it, because you don't know what's going to
Exactly.
happen.
Yeah. And the other thing that we have to talk about is being willing to go to providers, being willing to ask the questions. Like, and I know I talk about it all the time. So if you listen to the show regularly, I'm sorry, you're going to hear it again. We now know that TBI is the signature injury of the GWAT. If you were in military, if you shot mortars, if you were an artilleryman, if you were an infantry officer, if you were a soldier and you were around repeated concussive blasts, you should get yourself checked out. And now more than ever, there's tons of organizations that will help facilitate those tests and get you checked out. Because, I'll pop up the Venn diagram right here again. If you look at this Venn diagram, PTSD and TBI have a lot of co-occurring symptoms. And a lot of times the VA will tell you, hey, you just got PTSD, take these pills, shut up, don't worry about it. But what they don't tell you is there might be something wrong with your brain. You might have neuroinflammation. And the only way that you can take care of this is by being vulnerable enough to ask questions from your provider and seeking help. So please, today, don't suffer another day. Don't wait another minute. Be willing to ask for help. Be willing to go there and say, hey, you know what? From 2007 to 2018, I was part of a Ranger regiment friggin' platoon, or I was a mortarman, I was an artilleryman, and I've been behind the gun line for X amount of years. I think there might be an issue. The reason I am such a passionate advocate about this is because when we leave it undiagnosed, it can also lead to suicide. We know that now. It's been blasted throughout numerous reports. Numerous awesome journalists have talked about it. David Phillips did a story about the Navy SEAL suicide epidemic. And all of this is just to say, please, we need you in the fight. We need more veterans now more than ever within our communities. And sadly, we're not going to be able to fight this monster without you being vulnerable enough to ask for help. So take a moment today, be willing to talk to your provider and say, hey, I'm dealing with XYZ. These are correlated to TBI, and I'd like to get some help. It's that easy. It's that simple.
No, I agree. Getting assessed is really important. And kind of leading into what I'm doing now. So our clinic it's actually a part of a larger alliance under the Avalon Action Alliance. And so we're one of 7 TBI clinics around the nation.
Seven
We
TBI
assess
clinics around the nation?
Yeah,
My
so we have
goodness.
yeah, so we have and I work at one of them. I'm at the best one. I'm here in Florida. Although don't tell my partners that. I may be a little biased. But we actually we'll bring veterans in. And each site is a little different depending on the need, but
Mhm.
and they have their different requirements. But we see pre 9/11. We also see post 9/11. But it starts off with a 3-day assessment. We'll assist and help cover, the logistics to be able to get the individual to our program. So airfare, lodging, food, all of that. But then the assessment itself is really unique because we take an integrative integrative care to our program. And so, you come in and you're going to meet with our clinical team and tell your story, what we call meet the team. You're meeting with
Yeah.
our core clinical providers, so like physical therapy, neuropsychology and speech therapy. I mean, like all these different therapists. And you go over your story. If you've had one head injury, even if it was as a kid and you didn't have anything in the military or post military, it does not matter. We'll sit there and take a look at that and your symptoms. And then over the next day and a half, the individual providers are going to have follow-on questions for you, assessments and everything. And then at the end of it, they come together and they say, hey, does Ashton here have a TBI? And they'll sit there and all come together and make that conclusion. What will usually take months, sometimes years, to be able to meet with all these providers in a normal clinical setting, we do in a 3-day period. And I think
Wow.
that's the first step, the absolute first step in understanding what's going on. Because for the longest time, I know for me personally, I thought it was okay, that it was normal to have headaches all the time, to have that vertigo, with your vestibular system kind of going all over. I
Yep.
mean, again, I was sitting there, I'm like, oh yeah, it's perfectly fine to fall flat on your face when you stand back up too fast. And then I found out that that's actually not normal. So,
Yep.
but there's so many symptoms, whenever it comes to the, just like you were saying, where, PTSD and TBI crosses over. And I know when I was a kid, I hit my head on everything. I was a little short thing, going and trying to run underneath the tables and knocking myself out and everything. So, and if anybody is listening that has kids, I'm sure you've seen your kids, get knocked in the head. If you played sports injury, you had sports
Yeah.
injuries,
Sports
football is
specifically.
huge. It
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'll even take it a step further. Those of us that, fired any shoulder fired weapon, that vibration goes right up, and those can cause issues. And so, you don't know, you may not have a single incident to be able to sit there and report, but if you're having any of those TBI symptoms, just give us a call, go ahead and start that assessment. And then afterwards determine like, hey, are you going to be interested? Or are you an appropriate fit for an intensive outpatient program? Because I would much rather, instead of having, months and years of therapy, I'd rather get that thing done in 3 weeks, or two, however long those programs are, and just say, hey, for our program, it's 3 weeks, and get those skills, get those skills to be able to improve your lifestyle. Because I don't want to be messed up anymore. Like I want to sit there and be my normal, whatever that may
Yes.
look like.
Exactly. Ashton, I know we're on a tight timeline, but if you could, again, just reiterate, how do we get, if a veteran's ready to go to one of these clinics, how can they get a hold of you or get a hold of one of these hospitals? And where are they all located?
Yeah, absolutely. So, under the Avalon Action Alliance, so you can go to Avalon, AVALON, Action, Alliance, ALLIANC.org. And they have a area on the website where you can sit there and just apply now. Now, we're not crisis intervention, I will say that. But if you're looking to be able to get treated, and get that assessment going, I would just go to our Avalon Action Alliance. They have all 7 TBI clinics, on there. If you're wanting to come and you're in the Florida or Southeast area of the United States, you can reach out to the UF Health Haley Brain Wellness Program. You can also find me on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and all that. Just look for my name, and I can help get you connected either which way, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll pause right here. I'll put the fundraiser right here. You guys see it? It's right here. Go there, donate today. I appreciate it. All right, get that out of the way. Move it out of the way. Okay, now Avalon Alliance right here. Click there. If you want to finally get help for your TBI or concussive trauma, please reach out to Ashton, reach out to one of these awesome hospitals and get help today. Ashton, I can't thank you enough for making time to jump on this. I know you're a busy individual helping tons of people out, but it is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Again, please reach out to Ashton. Her link to her LinkedIn will be on the episode description as well. So please get in touch, get help. Till then, take care.